Yes, please bring my prop forward, Harry. Thank you. This is a prop for today. This normally lives in the spare bedroom, and I put it downstairs this morning, or last night, and when I came down, absolutely terrified me because I thought somebody was in my hallway. I was a bit like, whoa. Anyway, this will all come to be, but whilst this is here, this is my dress mannequin, because I like to make my own clothes, and she is the representation of me today. So you will understand why, as we go along, why she's there. So for me, my testimony, I've never had an issue with God's existence. From the earliest time that I can remember, God existed to me. I believed that he was real. I used to get left on a door with my sister to a church plant in a school called the Dingle Primary School, and I'd be left there with my sister, and we'd go in and we'd do a kids' church thing. And I loved going because one of the kids' leaders there, her birthday was the same day as me. She'd always buy me a Barbie. So that's what I remember, is having a Barbie and singing This Little Light of Mine and them dancing with me. And that I remember that, and then I'd go off to my grandparents' house on a Sunday, we'd have lunch, I'd come home, and I knew that Jesus loved me. But I got older, and things happened. Even though when I was little, we'd have talent shows at school, and I'd get my friends to pray that we'd be chosen next, so I could do my little dance and then go off, because that's what was important to me, and I knew that God cared about what was important to me. But as I got older, as more things in my life happened, labels became things that would attach themselves to me. I became I carried things, and I still do, in a way that I would feel like they're so stuck to me, it's like sewn to my skin, are things that people would say to me. And that is really part of my testimony today, is I want to share with you about labels. There's a joke in our family that I don't cut labels out of clothes. I even put a new pair of shorts on yesterday for my mum's birthday party, and I'd left the label in that. I thought that was quite ironic after what I'd been preparing all week. The fact that I didn't walk down the aisle with a label in my wedding dress was probably impressive as well. I've rocked up at all occasions with the label in my clothes. I think the dress I wore when I was ordained still had the label in as well. But labels are part of my life. They're part of the things that I attach to me. The first one that was attached to me as a child was, she is too chatty. Every single school report says, Steph is a delightful little girl. She works really hard, but she talks a lot. They all said things like that. I was too chatty. But part of that was sharing Jesus with my friends. I'd walk around the school playground, and I went to see Joseph Technical Dreamcoat play, and I would sing the songs walking around the playground, because I was a bit intense as a child, wanted to tell everyone about Jesus. But then I discovered sport. And sport then, that was everything. You will know, if you've got children playing sport, it always happens on a Sunday. Athletics competitions were a Sunday. We'd travel around the country. I would be training 2-3 times a week. I'd be competing over weekends. My dad used to get really frustrated because we'd only go to somewhere and I'd only run maximum, because I did sprints, so 100-metre hurdles I did. I was done in 20 seconds. Really frustrating for my dad, and he'd sit in the car if it was raining and listen to the cricket. But church became less and less important to me, until there was an opportunity when my sister started. I've got an older sister called Liz. When she went to secondary school, she had a friend who invited her to a church youth group at an Assemblies of God church. And one Wednesday night, my parents didn't know what to do with me. They really needed a babysitter for me. And my sister's like, well, I don't want her to go. She does everything I do. She did not want me there. But lo and behold, I went, and that is when God became real again for me. I was excited about sweets. That was very important to me. But I was also excited about having fun. The leaders, we'd be putting their faces in baked beans. They would be spraying us with water guns. You name it, they were doing in this place. And it was so much fun. I then started helping out in this group with the younger children as I grew up, and I got my first boyfriend. My first long-term boyfriend was someone who wasn't a very nice person and really, really hurt me. I used to have to get the bus to Dudley and then get another bus, and I would be terrified sat on the bus to go to his house. He would tell me constantly that I wasn't enough, that I was not pretty enough, I was too much this, I was too much that. He would tell me how I had to have my hair. He would control me. He would lead me into things that I didn't want to do. And he was not a nice person. But I didn't know that I was more than that. I didn't know that I was worth more, because the youth group I went to, we had fun and we heard about Jesus, but no one was sat discipling me in a way that wasn't packing the scripture to tell me that I was more. That I was God's child, that I was chosen. But at this point in my life, I wasn't super around church. I helped on a Friday and I would occasionally go on a Sunday. But I was running everywhere. I was doing athletics, I was doing my A-levels. And God, although I knew he loved me, I didn't know that people did. I didn't know that I could be loved and that I was worth more. And the care that was taken to me from this church in this time was that I was like the woman at the well, that I was the outcast in this place, that I had somehow led this person astray, that I was the things that were said over me because I apparently made him do things, when it was all coercion and control, and I didn't understand what was happening to me until I had to do a safeguarding training course. And I sat there, and this incredible kids worker that I'd known for such a long time, I realised what had happened to me. And I walked out, and this wonderful woman, Debbie, sat with me, and I said, "This is happening to me now." But I couldn't quite explain why or who or what was going on. And this teenage boy that I was dating was stood leading worship. He was invited to do everything. And then when I used to work in shoe in Merry Hill. Sold a lot of shoes in my time, really like shoes. And I started to lose a lot of weight because I wasn't eating, because I was scared. I didn't like the way I looked, and I became anorexic. I had such a bad relationship with food. My mum would pack me a lunch, and I'd throw it in the bin on the way because I also didn't know where to eat. It was really hard to find a place to eat in sixth form in the rain when you didn't feel that you had any friends to go to or places to be. And the only place I could go was our graphics room, but you weren't allowed to eat in there. So there was no place for me. That's how I felt. But I met someone, the people I worked with in Shoe, they showed me God's love even though they didn't know they were doing that. They didn't know anything about Jesus, but they showed me God's love. I remember one of them grabbing my belt and being like, "Steph, you're wasting away. Eat a donut." And that's what they would do all the time to me. But it was in a way that loved me. So when I went to university, I felt that I was running away from all of this. And I ended up doing theology at uni. And there at uni, I don't even know how I really ended up doing it, but I do know that when I looked around the University of Chester, that I felt God wanted me there. I felt God's trust in that place. But I ended up in a house with 11 girls. Have you ever lived with 11 girls? It's a lot of hormones, a lot of competition. It was this massive Georgian house. And there were some really lovely people there, but there was also some really difficult people there. But I would go off dutifully. I'd go off dutifully for my court, and then I went into athletics, and then I used to do gymnastics when I was younger, so I went off to trampolining, and I wasn't really around. And when I met people in sports and societies, and those off my course, and the girls I lived with, I didn't really get to know. And I found that really hard, because I felt that I was excluded from that too. But I'd chosen another way, but it still felt hard being in that house when I didn't know them, or didn't know them that well. And some of the things these girls did, oh my goodness. You name it, that happened in that house. But I went to my theology lectures, and we had one, and I think it was our Trinity lecture. But I remember the lecturer from the front saying, anybody here got any sort of faith or believe in God? And nobody had asked anybody at this point in this question. And I put my hand up. And so did a group of others. And I sort of knew that they were Christians. And this girl came up to me and said, Steph, you don't go to CU, but you say you're a Christian. Do you want to come with me? And I said, no. I said, I didn't want to go. I wanted to get drunk. I wanted to sleep with boys, and I wanted to have a nice time. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get my course done. I wanted to go and be an academic. I wanted to do my master's and my PhD, a lecture at uni, never leave university life. That's what I wanted to do. That was everything was set on not failing to do that. So I didn't go. But she persisted. Nevertheless, she persisted. And she asked me again. And at this point, I felt really lost. I'd got freshers flu, and I couldn't get rid of it. And this had been like 3 months of having no voice. And I was really low, I missed home, so I went. And someone talked about, what they were talking about was, you might have heard about a sex talk. And they're talking about a piece of cake. And if you've had sex with many people, you've given that away, and that was a representation for you. So you'd given all yourself away, and what I heard was God doesn't love you. And that's what I heard. That's not what was said, but that's what I heard. And I walked out. I thought, nah, trampolining's on the same night as CU, so I'm not going to go. But somehow, I think 1 week it was cancelled, and I went back. And the person then talked about 2 ways to live. Different person. And I just remember being hysterical on the floor and saying to God, no, I can't live these 2 ways anymore. I can't know that I love you, know that I love the ways of the world, but that's hurting me. But church hurts me, people hurt me in church. The world hurts me. Where do I go? And he said, come to me. He sat with me in that moment. He met me exactly where I was at. And he loved me. And then from then, there was quite a nice looking chap at the front that I used to see at CU. He looked all right, thought he was a bit older than me. Suddenly, he appeared at everything I went to. And then I married him a few years later. But in all of that, God was at work in me. He brought me to places that I never thought I'd get to go, or I'd have conversations with people that I never thought would happen. I never thought that I would be protected in places, or have somebody with me in those situations. When I was 16, before I went to university, the church youth group took us to Audacious Conference in Manchester, which is a Christian festival aimed at young teenagers. And it's in a massive warehouse in Manchester. And I was so fed up in that place at that time because of this boyfriend I had who was being horrible to me, and I was really struggling. But there, God gave me hope. He gave me a picture of me running up a hill and saying, you are going to speak to thousands. You are going to tell thousands about how much I love them. I'm going to use you. And I held on to that. I held on to that love that he had for me, and in his kindness, him assuring me that there was more to my life, that I was worth more. So things that people have said over me. Laura, do you mind just coming to stick some of these on there? And I'm going to read them out as you put them on there. So I was labelled as not pretty enough. What's that one? I was the sporty one. That was what was said over me. That was only good enough if you wanted me to win a game of netball. I was too aspirational. That's what this boyfriend's mum used to say of me. I was too aspirational. What's that one? I wasn't like other girls. I didn't have what he wanted from me. I wasn't the ideal woman. I was too strong, too busy, unlikable, invalid, damaged goods, broken, unworthy. There were all these things. You'll get the idea as Laura sticks them on, that these were the things that I carried. How many of us here are carrying similar things over us? Over things that the world has said over us? That were too loud, were unagreeable, a failure, an outcast. I believed all of these things that Laura's sticking on. All of these things. And I was afraid. I didn't see a way out. I didn't see how. But God met me in that place. But the biggest thing that I held was that I wasn't enough. Even though I knew God's deep love for me, and he met me in that place, that is what I carried. So the woman at the well, this is a story that gives me undeniable hope. It gives me undeniable strength because he had time for her. Jesus had time for her. As she stood there, there's so much we could draw from this passage, isn't there? As she's at the well, we could draw so much from it. But what I think, the three things that I draw from it are, she had time for her. Jesus had time for her. He met her where she was at. And he saw her as a person and lifted off those labels that were said over her. So the woman at the well. There are many, many layers to this interaction, but by all means, it was wrong for that period of time. It's something we can't quite get our head around, that if you were out in the street now, you were sat by the water feature, say, and he started chatting to a man, it wouldn't be seen that you'd be pushed out and be an outcast from a society from that conversation. But for her, that was the case. He was a Jew, she was a Samaritan, he was a man, she was a woman. She was a woman alone in the middle of the day drawing water because she was unwelcomed by others and they still spoke to each other. This woman was an outcast because she had 5 husbands and the one that she lived with wasn't her husband. And drawing water from a well would have been a social activity. You would have done that with your friends. You'd have found all the street gossip. You'd have known what was going on in that place by the conversations at the well. But she was unwelcome there. She was an outcast. She wasn't welcome in that place. But this interaction with Jesus was considered so wrong that it wouldn't have been surprising if when she saw Jesus, she would have just walked away. But actually, it's the longest conversation that we have in the book of John between Jesus and another person. And it's with a woman. Women feel validated here. He has time for you. But this deeply taboo nature of this conversation And I think it implies that there is something compelling about Jesus in that moment, that this woman, although everything inside of her probably wanted her to leave, she stayed in that moment. She stayed with Jesus because she didn't want to leave him. Warts and all, she stayed and listened and spoke to him. And as she's drawing the water out in the heat of the day, she must have felt so much shame over her. And he asks her, "Will you get me some water?" He meets her exactly where she is at in her activity. Like Jesus met me where I was at, on the floor in the Malloy building in Chester University, Jesus met her. And it isn't what Jesus does, but it's that he met her in the deepest pains. He met me in my brokenness, and he met this woman in her brokenness. He didn't say to me, "Steph, get your stuff sorted before you can have a relationship with me." Instead, he said, "Lean on me. Learn of my grace and mercy, and we can journey together." And that's what he did in that moment at the well. He didn't tell her that he couldn't deal with her then because she wasn't perfect enough. He met her where she was at and journeyed with her in that moment. Jesus is so different from us as humans. As humans, we judge others. We judge others and we put labels on people. We might see people out who are socioeconomically different from us, their life experience, their mistakes, the way that they parent, the job that they have. But Jesus sees us, the person. It is radical, but it is Jesus. And he works with us through our brokenness. And when he tells the Samaritan woman who he is, she leaves that water, and she leaves the water jar, and she runs. She runs back to the city and says, "Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" Jesus has time for you, and he meets you where you're at. In all our stories, no story isn't extraordinary when it's about coming to know Jesus. But I love this moment in particular, that she's got the jar. That was her task in that moment. She drops it, and she goes, because she's so excited to tell others about Jesus. She has a sudden urge to share the good news that overwhelms her desire to remain anonymous and invisible anymore, to realize that this big label of outcast that she has, she doesn't care about that anymore. It's lifted off her. I love that this is her story. Once a source of pain and secrecy, becomes evidence that she uses to proclaim Jesus' identity. She's asking them to come and see who Jesus is. Come and see what he has done for me and what he can do for you. Even her questions about Jesus become her evangelism. Even her curiosity becomes a tool that arouses the curiosity of others. But most of all, I love that Jesus honors and blesses her. John writes that Jesus stays in the woman's city for 2 days so that everyone who hears her testimony can meet him directly and see that the woman is a reliable witness. Outcast to witness of Jesus. Person that nobody wanted. No, she couldn't go near them, to someone who Jesus chose and used for the good news of his kingdom. And it's in the Bible. That's important and significant. There'll be so many stories that could have gone in there, and that one's in there. In Jesus having time for her and meeting her where she is at, she was able to see that she was worth more. He set her free from the labels that society had put on her, and he gave her a new label. He gave me a new label when I gave my life to him, and does so every day when I try to stick other labels on myself, and gave her the label of child of the King. So none of these anymore was significant. None of those mattered anymore. None of those matter because Jesus calls me as a child, a daughter of his. So whatever it is that you are carrying, whatever part of your testimony you feel is too heavy, too weighty, that Jesus wouldn't have you as his, that is wrong. You are a child of the King. And I really hope today that some of you throw your jugs of waters down because you're so excited to tell others about Jesus, as I was as a child and am today.